Rousseau's second major claim: sovereignty is indivisible. You cannot divide it among different institutions or create checks and balances. The sovereign power must be unified and whole. Montesquieu had argued for separating legislative, executive, and judicial powers among different institutions that check each other. The British Constitution, with its mixture of monarchical, aristocratic, and democratic elements, represented this ideal. Rousseau argues this approach is fundamentally mistaken because it confuses sovereignty with government. Sovereignty is exercising the general will, the legislative power creating laws. Government is executing those laws. Sovereignty belongs entirely and indivisibly to the people. It cannot be divided without ceasing to be sovereignty. When English theorists spoke of mixed constitution, they were describing mixed government, not mixed sovereignty. Sovereignty has essential characteristics making division impossible. It concerns only general matters. It expresses the general will. It is inalienable and indivisible. You cannot have multiple sovereign powers without incoherence. Modern constitutional theory tries to divide sovereignty: legislative power here, executive power there, judicial review over here. Rousseau would say this approach is fundamentally mistaken because it confuses sovereignty with government. Sovereignty is making law. That belongs wholly to the people. Government is executing law. That can be organized various ways, but sovereign power itself cannot be divided. The people cannot delegate different aspects of sovereignty to different institutions while retaining it themselves. They must exercise legislative power completely and directly. They can organize government however they choose, but these are forms of government, not sovereignty.
There is only one contract in the state, that of association, and this of itself excludes all others. No constitutional settlement can bind the sovereign people. Every generation must be free to reconstitute government. Entrenchment clauses, supermajority requirements, constitutional limitations all attempt to bind sovereignty, which is impossible. This creates profound instability. If no law or institutional arrangement can bind future exercises of popular sovereignty, how can rights be protected, minorities safeguarded, or long-term commitments made? Rousseau's answer: these protections must come from civic virtue and proper understanding of the general will, not from institutional mechanisms. Indivisibility also means rejecting federalism. You cannot divide sovereignty between national government and state government without creating incoherence. Either the national government is sovereign, making federalism fiction, or state governments are sovereign, making the nation a federation of independent states, or you have genuinely divided sovereignty, which is impossible. Modern democratic theory has largely rejected Rousseau's stark position, attempting to combine popular sovereignty with institutional complexity, constitutional stability, and minority protections. But Rousseau would argue these compromises betray the fundamental principle: either the people are sovereign or they aren't. If they are, they must exercise that sovereignty fully and directly. If they cannot, sovereignty has been alienated.
One of Rousseau's most controversial proposals addresses religion's role in the Republic. He argues that legitimate democracy requires what he calls civil religion, a set of civic beliefs that bind citizens together and support republican virtue. Traditional Christianity, Rousseau argues, is actually incompatible with republican citizenship. Why? Because Christianity teaches that ultimate loyalty belongs to God and salvation in the next life, not to the earthly state. This divided loyalty weakens civic commitment. Christians make poor soldiers because they don't fear death sufficiently. They make poor citizens because they prioritize heaven over the republic. Moreover, Christianity's emphasis on universal brotherhood and peace contradicts the patriotic fervor and willingness to fight that republics require. Christian meekness and forgiveness don't produce the civic virtue necessary for self-government. Rousseau distinguishes three types of religion. First, the religion of man, pure Christianity, focused on internal spirituality, no external worship, no political dimension. This makes good humans, but poor citizens. Second, the religion of the citizen, civic religion tied to particular states like ancient Rome. This makes good citizens, but often leads to intolerance. Third, Christianity as actually practiced, with divided loyalty between church and state, creating perpetual tension. His solution is civil religion, a minimal set of civic beliefs that the sovereign can impose. These beliefs include existence of a powerful, intelligent, benevolent divinity, the afterlife, rewards for the just and punishment for the wicked, sanctity of the social contract and laws, and religious tolerance itself. Crucially, these are not religious dogmas, but social sentiments necessary for being a good citizen. Anyone who doesn't accept them should be banished, not as impious, but as antisocial, incapable of sincerely loving the laws and justice.
More controversially, anyone who publicly accepts these beliefs but then acts as if they don't believe them should be punished by death. They have committed the greatest crime, lying before the laws. This proposal shocked Rousseau's contemporaries and continues to trouble readers. It seems to introduce the religious intolerance and thought control that the Enlightenment philosophy opposed. Rousseau demands citizens profess specific beliefs on pain of exile or death. But Rousseau argues this isn't religious intolerance. You can believe whatever you want privately. It's political necessity. Democracy requires citizens who care about the common good above private interest. Without shared civic commitment, the general will cannot function. The civil religion provides that shared commitment. It creates the psychological bonds necessary for citizens to see themselves as part of a collective with common interests. It channels religious sentiment towards civic purposes rather than otherworldly ones. Critics see this as totalitarian, the state dictating belief, punishing dissent, demanding complete commitment. It prefigures the civic religions of modern totalitarian movements, the cult of the supreme being during the French Revolution, communist civic rituals, fascist political religion. But Rousseau would respond that every functional political community requires shared commitments. Modern liberal democracies have their own civil religions, constitutional patriotism, commitment to democratic values, belief in human rights. We just don't call it religion. The question is whether Rousseau's explicit and forced civil religion is more honest than modern liberal democracies' implicit, informal civic commitments, or whether it crosses a line into dangerous state control of conscience.
Rousseau acknowledges a fundamental problem with his theory. Direct democracy requires small states, but small states are vulnerable to large ones. How can legitimate government survive in a world of powerful large states? The ideal republic, for Rousseau, is small enough that citizens can actually assemble, know each other personally, and deliberate collectively. Geneva, ancient Athens, Rome in its republican period. These exemplify the human scale necessary for genuine popular sovereignty. But small states face military vulnerability. They can be conquered by large monarchies with professional armies and centralized power. The very conditions that make democracy possible, small size, equality, civic participation, make military weakness likely. Rousseau has no good solution to this dilemma. He suggests small states might form confederations for mutual defense while maintaining internal sovereignty. But he recognizes this is precarious. The military advantages of size and centralization are real. This raises a deeper question. If legitimate government is only possible in small republics, and small republics cannot survive in a world of large states, is legitimate government effectively impossible in the modern world? Rousseau seems to accept this pessimistic conclusion. Most existing states are illegitimate. Legitimate government is rare and precarious. But how do legitimate republics come into existence? How do people corrupted by existing society transform themselves into virtuous citizens? This is where Rousseau introduces his most mysterious concept, the legislator. The legislator is an extraordinary individual who founds the republic by creating its fundamental laws and institutions. This person must have almost superhuman wisdom, understanding human nature deeply, remaining detached from particular interests, caring about the distant future more than present glory. The legislator faces a paradox. To create laws that will make people virtuous, they need virtuous people who don't yet exist. To discover the rules of society best suited to nations, a superior intelligence beholding all the passions of men without experiencing any of them would be needed. Moreover, the legislator cannot use force. That would create tyranny, not legitimate republic. They cannot use reason alone. The people aren't yet capable of recognizing good laws. So the legislator must appeal to divine authority, claiming the gods speak through them. This noble lie provides the authority needed to establish the republic. Rousseau cites Moses, Lycurgus, Numa as examples of legislators who founded republics by claiming divine inspiration. Once the republic is established and citizens are formed, it can sustain itself through the general will. But the founding moment requires this extraordinary individual using extraordinary means. This creates serious problems for Rousseau's theory. If legitimate government requires a miraculous founder using deception, how can it be truly legitimate? If ordinary people cannot create legitimate government themselves, doesn't this contradict popular sovereignty? Rousseau never fully resolves this tension. The legislator seems necessary, but also seems to violate the principles the republic is based on. It suggests that democratic legitimacy requires an undemocratic founding. This problem has haunted democratic theory since. Founding moments, constitutional conventions, revolutionary assemblies exercise extraordinary power to create the framework within which ordinary democratic politics will occur. But how is that founding moment itself legitimated? By the Constitution it creates? That's circular. By popular ratification? But the people ratifying have been shaped by the founding itself.